Time for what?
Time for what?
Experience in college.
Time for reinforcement.
Time for liftoff!
Where nothing is impossible unless you think it is impossible.
College.
I have my college scholarship.
Yes. Boom.
College ran by real fast.
You hung in with the best college.
First time for everything.
Well, what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for?
Let's do this thing.
Genius, let's do this thing!
We are here with someone who's infamous. Now, if you're a subscriber to our podcast, our number one who started off all this magic is the one and only Julio Mata. Welcome, Julio. Welcome back again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Now, something has changed, though. You're not on the table side where the college. You went somewhere else.
I did.
Okay, so tell them where you're at. Tell them a little bit in case we have some new listeners who you're all about, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. When I last was on the podcast, I was working as a regional representative for Miami University in Ohio. And now, for the past 3 years, I have transitioned to a role as a college counselor at the Francis Parker School in San Diego, California. It's been a wild 3 years, especially learning to be a college counselor in the midst of the pandemic and adjusting to all the things that have shifted in the midst of all that. But it's been a really great transition into a new role with unique challenges and opportunities to keep growing and learning, but also to keep serving students and families through this process.
But a powerful role, right? I think on both sides of it. And I think you could have handled it, because didn't you win an award?
Yeah. So, let's see, maybe 2015, 2016, I won an award for, it was a Finks Murdoch new admission counselor award, which basically was from WCAC, a way of recognizing the contributions to the profession and basically people saying like, hey, you have potential, you can do good things.
And that's what makes you perfect for this episode right now. So we're going to talk about, we have no crystal ball in front of us about what the future of college admissions, except it's going to be constantly changing, right? We thought the pandemic, right, the heat of it was like, okay, of course, there's a lot of changes, but the changes are changing a lot. So what are some of your top 2 thoughts about colleges, where they are now and where you think they're heading?
I think you said it perfectly. Like it's changes upon changes, and that's the one thing that we know is going to be certain. The past 4 years, I always kind of reflect back on 5 years. That each year there's been a significant change to the admission process. Of course, in the past 3 years, it's been much more significant.
Right.
With testing policies changing, things getting easier and harder, transcripts having pass, no pass type of grades, and colleges just trying to make sense of everything. I think moving forward, there's still going to be some of those ripple waves from the pandemic kind of settling down as things that were trial run policies for a temporary time become either permanently embedded or permanently scrapped. And I think right now in particular, testing is kind of the big focal point, just because there seems to be kind of dueling messages, right? That some school systems, like the California state system, that said we're permanently test free, and then MIT says that they are going back to requiring test scores, and they both said it was for purposes of equity in their admission process, which seems conflicting at best when you kind of read through the language that both described. The thing is, it benefits both of those schools in a different way, in either selecting their students or giving students access to those opportunities that they have in education. And unfortunately, the other thing I see kind of moving forward with colleges is maybe not the steep increase in applications as much, but the steadiness of really large numbers of applications at a lot of schools, especially as they make those temporary test optional policies permanent, because having that test-free option or no testing option for students to submit applications with has yielded them with many more applicants, and that gives them that much more ability to choose who they want to be at their universities. By re-implementing some of those testing policies, I can only imagine like a place like MIT might see a drop in applications from what they've been seeing in the past 3 years. So it'd be interesting to kind of like see how that shifts, because my guess is that depending on what happens at MIT, other schools might follow suit, and they're going to let them kind of lead the charge and be the experimental guinea pig before they say, okay, cool, we're reinstating testing or we're not reinstating testing.
Right, because when MIT made that announcement, Caltech didn't go back on its word,
No.
saying, or Harvey Mudd, right, who are just ranked in STEM just as highly as they are.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think what's coming down, what I've noticed is that what I've been telling my students is that, you know, you're being selfish for good reason. This is a college that has these certain needs for me that can fulfill my needs or wants, and the colleges are also being selfish. This is what we need. And when MIT did do that, whether it's going to be right or wrong in the future, they're noticing like, whoa, our kids who were test free, test optional did not do very well on our campus. And I know some other campuses like Stanford, the kids that came in test optional, they surveyed them and they were like, let's see how you're doing. Let's see your quarter grades. Let's go in. Okay, it seems okay so far. All right, let's bring it up, right? So and I think a lot of families don't realize there's this give and take.
Correct.
Right? There is. And hopefully you won't scold me on this, but if the family is very savvy, they'll ask for the help and the resources and get from the school. If they're not, they'll reach out to other people and be just so desperate, or they'll play this assumption game. You know, what do you think is creating that? Because now we're in this world of technology, the internet. Most parents are going, well, I mean, listen, if my mom with a 5th grade education knows how to use her cell phone and the internet and YouTube and all, so can most parents and guardians, right? So what do you think is happening, this big gap of information?
Absolutely. I think, all the headlines regarding college admission are scary. Even us as professionals that see this news and know how to digest it still takes some time to not just sensationalize the increases that some colleges are seeing in applications, the decrease in selectivity that some colleges are seeing, and then apply that as a fact to every college, to every institution. And that's something I have to constantly remind my students and families about, that just because a certain type of school is seeing this significant increase in applications or a significant decrease in their acceptance rates doesn't mean that every school is in that same boat.
That's
I know some of my juniors are one even told me that they were nervous that they couldn't get into any college because it's gotten so much harder in the past couple of years. And I had to kind of just pump the brakes and remind them that actually the national average for admission selectivity for a college is about 60%. It's like 2/3. Most colleges say yes more often than say no.
That's right.
But students don't hear that message. They only hear it's gotten so significantly harder to get into a UC university. It's been so much harder to get into a super selective institution, and they just connect those dots. And so parents on the same side of things, like, they're getting all that information. And if they don't have someone like us to help process that information with and make sense of it and rationalize it and contextualize it to the school, to their community, to what their experience is going to be,
right,
then it's so easy to kind of take that and spin out of control in your head and get the wrong idea of what actually you have in front of you as far as opportunities go. With that knowledge that there's so much information out there and so much room to potentially have it be misinformation, it's important for families to know, like, okay, who are my resources? Who are the people that I can go to and talk through this with?
Right.
And process this information with? Because, again, no family is alone in going through this process. There's counselors, there's folks like us, there's organizations like the ones that we participate in that have tons of people ready to help demystify the process and help really make sense of all these crazy numbers that are being tossed about. Because, I can see how all that doom and gloom that's shared through the media and through like different news sources. They say it because it's popular. It's talking about these big name schools, even though it's doing the complete opposite of what we're trying to do as education professionals and talking about access and opportunities to education. Instead, they're talking about how restrictive and elusive a college education can be.
No, but you have to admit too, though, we have those students who did look at the big names, apply majority of them because they listened to our guidance, put in some likely schools and stuff, got into them, maybe one or two target, but their heads as seniors are down because they don't feel they're validated.
Right.
And I think we need to earlier have that conversation, but I think that also the kids need to feel and experience that. And what I'm talking about is I remember so many of my students who did some type of enrichment program at a college or university, not those national leadership conference things, that's something that's run from the college, but like they would go to a school, let's say, for example, like Drexel University, they have a summer program, like, oh my God, this school is so amazing. Or maybe they'll do a UCLA summer immersion, like, oh my God, this campus is so huge, and it's like, I don't know if I'll be noticed over here, or vice versa, right? And so I think it's hard to demystify things when you've had years of label at the kitchen table.
Absolutely.
Oh, I heard our neighbors so-and-so got into college X. Well, one day, because I'll have some parents who graduate from amazing schools like University of Tennessee or University of Pittsburgh, and they're like, well, my kid needs to go to college Y. And I'm like, yeah, but you're pretty successful, and you just said you hired this great candidate at your big firm who came from here. So, I mean, how do you plan to, you think that families are going to hear that message? Because there's this one thing called, you tell me what you think, rankings. That thing from U.S. News. Oh, did you hear that sigh, everyone? There was a big woof. So talk to me about rankings, because even I showed rankings from LinkedIn or other ones from PayScale, it's a big one for that I love. The first top 10, you have to scroll a little bit, are Ivy Leagues.
So I think it's really easy to hate rankings, really easy to, especially as a counselor, to just rag on them because they are flawed. Very, very naturally flawed because they're biased. They're rife with bias.
Just like those yearbook polls, right? Very 100%. Biased. They're not right. Stop doing those, people.
And I think the best thing a student can do, if they're really curious, if they want to get into the details of what's being ranked, always look into the methodology. Always look in to see what is being valued. Any good ranking system will share their methodology to be transparent, so that people understand what they're looking at. Again, a typical American parent or family or anybody looking for an American higher education isn't going to take that time necessarily, which is why people like us, that's our role. We're the experts. We can decipher that information and put it in front of someone and say, hey, so did you know that about 60% of the value of a U.S. News & World ranking revolves around money? Money donated, money spent, not about student outcomes. Nothing in those rankings talks about graduation or placement, student success. They don't talk about the kind of education that students have. They talk about barriers. They talk about entry points. And a college isn't defined by how they enter students, how they let students come in. It's defined by what they produce. But rankings don't capture that. Very few rankings do. The ones that talk about like employment, salary ranges, that kind of stuff.
But there's no happiness factor.
Exactly. Exactly. So I always tell my students, if they want to use rankings, to always be critical thinkers when it comes to it. To use the rankings as a launching point. If one source says that this school is ranked number 1 in whatever category, whether it's academic, whether it's the beauty of the campus or the how much of a party school it is or whatever. I say, okay, that's one person's opinion. Do your own research and figure out if you agree or disagree. Because just because U.S. News & World Report says this school is ranked 1, 2, 3, whatever, why is that the truth? Why does everyone accept that? That's marketing. Everything with those rankings is a tool to market those schools and their position to other people. In addition to, I think, when it comes to the springtime, when students are making their college decisions, the rankings tend to kind of rear their ugly heads again as students are comparing option A and option B that they have where they were admitted. And the conversation always comes up like, well, this school is ranked better than this other school. And I say, well, this school says on this list it's ranked 25. This school says it's ranked 25th. Or 26 or 27. Like, what's the difference? It's minor. It's trivial. It's nothing actually significant. But because one school has a higher number than the other,
they'll listen to that higher number.
They'll listen to the higher number. And they'll ignore the facts that there's other reasons why that school might be a better fit for them than just what one list, one source cites as marginally better than the other.
No, and I think that's why, niche looks pretty, it's beautiful, and the ranking's so nice. But if I tell kids to use ratemyprofessors.com, which I know is not a pretty website because they don't follow you, right?
Yeah.
It's just ads. They don't ask you to set up an account. It is the real Rotten Tomatoes of a college campus.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I don't care if it's a community college or an Ivy. It's so accurate. It's not 100%, but I think it's time.
Yeah.
I think time is an issue, but you have to invest that time with you and have to reflect
Exactly.
a little bit. But